The webinar is being recorded, and we will make the recording available for download after the event. So with that, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Victor Gaxiola, subject matter expert for Actians. Victor?
Thank you, Steve, and good morning or good afternoon to everyone who's attending the session today. We're really excited to have both Greg and Mitch join us today in light of the fact that as early adopters, if you will, of social media and how it's being applied within their industry and within their particular business, today's discussion should shed some light on exactly some of the best practices that are taking their organizations, and then we'll go into the actual Q&A session from our standpoint of providing some questions to the panel and drawing out the conversation. So with that, why don't we get started with an introduction from Greg. So Greg?
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Victor. Gregory Cheng at Sterne, Agee. I run the retail office here. A little bit of background, was a financial advisor, helped run one of the flagship offices for Morgan Stanley for a number of years, and joined Sterne Agee to run the retail business here, and really have helped to spearhead the social media initiatives here at the firm, and excited to be here with Victor and Mitch and to share some ideas.
Great, thank you, Greg. And now we'll turn our attentions out to the East Coast to Mitch Slater to introduce himself.
Thanks, Victor, and thanks so much for asking me to join. My name is Mitch Slater. I've been a financial advisor for a little over 26 years. First career was working in broadcasting. I had the opportunity to work for the likes of Howard Stern, Larry King, Charlie Rose, and then decided to change careers and join Merrill Lynch on October 19th, 1987, which was my first day as a financial advisor, which was the stock market crash at the same time. It was an interesting time to start in this business, but 26 years later, here I am. I'm very proud to be part of UBS and a team called the Slater Trainer Group, along with my partner Ann Trainer. We are out here in Westfield, New Jersey. I've been an early adopter in all forms of marketing, media especially over the years, so social media was, to me, an obvious thing, and been fortunate to been able to try a number of things out here at UBS, which I'll talk about today.
Great. Well, thank you very much and for joining us today. Now, I've had the privilege of working both with Greg and Mitch here within Actians, and one of the areas that we focus on, obviously, is the adoption of social media after developing, if you will, that infrastructure. So just to get us started here, I was curious if the two of you could share with us how long your organization or yourself individually have been active in social media, and what are your preferred platforms? We'll start with Greg, and then we'll go to Mitch.
So using LinkedIn, and it's been just about a year. So you know, in a lot of the firms, the social media is restricted to LinkedIn to start. So we've been working to use that as the primary form of communication.
Okay.
I can primarily speak for myself, but I've been using LinkedIn as my main source because I truly believe that's the place that a financial advisor should be, and I've been doing that using LinkedIn the way that LinkedIn was intended to be used here at UBS as part of the pilot initially for a little over a year.
Okay, so both about a year or so, and anything that you've learned so far within the last year as far as the use of LinkedIn? I know that, Mitch, you might have a few tips to share as far as things that you've seen in working within LinkedIn to make connections.
Oh, absolutely, because LinkedIn is all about that. You know, I think in general, I think it's important to understand that social media is not a campaign, but a commitment. And for me, working on LinkedIn is just part of what I do every single day. And there's so many things that are critical when you get to work with a tool like that. It's really all about collecting data, getting highly connected, consuming it all, getting educated, and then actually, executing and doing the best that you can. For me, as far as LinkedIn, I think that your profile is your first impression, and you have to spend time to make that speak to who you are and what you can deliver, because that's really your homepage, right? That's the first thing that people are going to see when they find out if you actually do exist out in the online world. We try not to blanket connect. You really learn about the person first, understand why they should connect with you. There's really no contest to capture the most connections. I think that's essentially critical. Groups, something we'll talk about later, but if you really want to choose your groups carefully, pick ones that match your interest, get active, think very thoughtful responses. But really, when it comes down to it, it's all about giving, all right? Giving value. Give, and then keep giving. And I think that's a big part of what we do. The obvious stuff, no politics, no jokes. That's not what this is about. But you have to be active or you don't exist.
Right, and that's a key point. And one of the things that we've seen as far as the ease into implementation is, especially as it relates to working within LinkedIn, is exactly that, to develop the infrastructure, build out your profile, let people know exactly what kinds of problems you solve, and not to just limit yourself, if you will, to your current role, but some of the roles that you've had in the past, because some of the best practices really have to do with the fact that when it comes to connecting with individuals, sometimes it's some of the things that you have in common or some of the interests that you may have. So switching
Victor,
gears,
a couple other comments maybe about. I'm sorry, Victor, just a couple other comments to add to that. Some ways to think about your profile. If your family or friends found you online, would you be embarrassed by what they found? Coca Sexton, who's a global senior social marketing manager for LinkedIn and probably one of the most recognized experts in the tech industry, on his LinkedIn page says that every time that we get a LinkedIn member to think of their profile outside of the context of a resume and more like the reputation online, that we're rewarded by watching people transform their careers. So just to echo what Mitch said, it needs to be sort of a living and breathing brand for who you are and for your business.
Yeah, it's all about authenticity. I've actually learned a lot from Coca Sexton. I'm glad you brought that name up. Someone just really, I think, is totally understands our industry probably better than anyone, and coming from LinkedIn, and it's a great name to put out there. But it's really, people are just going to respond to authenticity. If you're going to show your own personality, you have to think about, if you were your ideal client, would you get a true sense of who you are? So by doing that through LinkedIn, that's something I think about really with everything that I share and with every conversation that I get into. And
it really is not doing things in a new way. It's doing what we've always done, only better, right? It's advisors I talk to often shy away from social media because they feel they're not technologically savvy enough, or that social media does too many new things. The fact is, it's no different from good old-fashioned networking face-to-face, just more efficient at connecting people and focusing the conversation on the right demographic, right? I mean, it's solving basic human problem of connectivity, and nothing replaces time, whether it's face-to-face or whether it's through some of these technologies.
Well, because the marketing world has changed. We grew up, and at least I grew up in the industry of the push marketing world. But things, this is a pull marketing society where the object is getting people drawn to you, because now they have to actually find you, and that's a huge difference. And I think once you realize that, really great things start to happen. I heard a great story, actually, I'll just share quickly, earlier today from an advisor that happens to be in our branch, who just recently joined LinkedIn, and within a few weeks someone found him that he had worked in a previous job that is turning into an instant, very, very profitable relationship. And it was literally, took his time, put the profile out there, worked with the great tools that Actiance is providing here, and really just, suddenly got found, and then boom, a large relationship. But you've got to make sure that those people can find you.
Right. And it's interesting because as I've attended some of these industry functions that focus on financial social media, and definitively LinkedIn is the preferred social network of choice, I think for most organizations that we work with, the biggest aha moment, the big, oh, wow, was the fact that, as Greg had pointed out, is that people realize that financial advisors who have had successful businesses, as a prerequisite of having that, they're social people. I mean, they're used to being in front of groups, being part of groups and associations and participating. And so if you will, the translation of taking that one-on-one participation from a group setting with groups and associations to LinkedIn is really just digitizing that process. And I think it's been really fascinating to see that transition take place as people start embracing social in light of the fact they've been social all along. Are you finding the same thing as it relates to implementation within your organizations?
Absolutely, and it's tracing back to just as Mitch was saying, that authenticity and relationship building. And think about how folks would originally build a business. You'd go out to whether it's your country club or the local watering hole or networking events, to be out in front of people with a hope of connecting with someone, being able to find some common interests, some shared interests, shared organizations, and exchanging a business card so that you could continue that conversation, continue to build trust and credibility, and share some ideas. And this is really no different, just using a different tool set.
Right, and what ultimately matters to any organization, and certainly to an advisor and to our team, is to try to master turning this online finesse into offline relationships. One of my favorite quotes comes from Gary Vaynerchuk, who I'm sure many of you know, a big deal in the social media world, someone I've had the opportunity to work pretty closely with. And Gary talks about this all the time. In a world of Jetsons, you've got to act more Flintstones. And really what that is saying is that these tools are fantastic. I mean, LinkedIn is the best networking tool that exists today, and it's free. It's fantastic. But the reality is you've got to go from that online relationship and actually move it into an offline relationship, have the finesse to do that and actually sit down at somebody's coffee table and have those discussions, because that's really where the business is going to happen.
Right, and it's interesting because one of the other aha moments that people will discover is that really social and social platform participation should be not looked upon as a separate silo or as a separate work stream, but something that already complements your existing business. So you mentioned Gary Vaynerchuk, obviously probably one of the most prolific and well-known people. I think he's on the cover. Is it Inc. magazine? I think he made the cover recently.
Yeah, he's on the cover this month of Inc. magazine.
And he's coming out with a new book, should be out shortly, if not already, which is outstanding. But you did an event with him. Can you share a little bit more about that, Mitchell, how you went about actually promoting it?
Sure. I had the opportunity, and Gary was generous in his time to allow me to do an event that I partnered with LinkedIn and Coca and some other excellent folks over there, and it giving us the opportunity to really talk to folks in our community in the New York City area that work in digital technology, that work in marketing specifically, to understand what's happening in social media. But for us, it was really the first event that we totally built using social media. Literally, I found the folks through social media, through LinkedIn, developed my own community, make sure to tag them in the groups on LinkedIn. We were overbooked for the event. We had 120 folks at one of our main offices in New York. We had a waiting list of over 200 people. Obviously, there were a lot of bloggers that were there that wrote about the event, so it kind of continued on and on. But what it showed me is that the businesses want to hear more about social media. So we, as advisors who are constantly trying to bring as much value as we can to our clients and our relationships, it's so critical to be able to give them that kind of an opportunity to hear a Gary Vaynerchuk speak. And I've done a lot of events over 25 years. I think I fed the entire state of New Jersey throughout the 90s, probably twice. But this was definitely the most significant and useful event that we've done, and the feedback and certainly the follow-up has just been fantastic.
That's great. Well, switching gears here from the standpoint is one of the things that we find as far as working with new people, especially if they're in the stage of kicking the tires and just trying to explore whether or not social is right for them. From your perspectives, this is for the two of you, and we'll start with Greg. What were some of the primary catalysts? I mean, how do you help answer for someone who's on the fence the why? You know, why should they participate in social?
I think it's credibility and remaining competitive. A recent tweet from the SIFMA social media conference sort of summed it up as social is an expectation. Clients will wonder where you are if you're not on. So I think if you're going to be relevant in this day and age, you've got to be on. I also think that from an efficiency point of view, I mean, social media fosters insight by allowing people to discover shared interests, organizations, and relationships a little more effectively. So those are really the and also I think an opportunity to kind of, from my perspective, leapfrog the competition. We were talking just before this webinar about how important it is to be engaged, because if you're not, you're not going to be in the flow, particularly if you're in some of the major metropolitan areas where you've got social in your backyard.
I mean, let's face it, and it's so true, Greg. I mean, most advisors look and sound the same to the general public. You have to make yourself more exciting. You have to differentiate yourself from the competition, or in my view, you're going to die. And that might mean talking about, you know, the nonprofits you're involved in, talking about things that you're truly passionate about, and finding those things in comparison with the folks that you work with or the folks that you want to work with. Because ultimately, likability matters a lot in this business, and trust obviously matters the most. And these are ways to building trust. So when you ask the question, why social media, I say, why not? Because you know, if you're not, you're missing out. I mean, Reid Hoffman, who's the CEO of LinkedIn, or founder really, you know, said the future belongs to networkers, and LinkedIn's growing at like 2 members a second. You better be there. You better be in that, you know, you better be playing there.
So true. Well, the other pattern that we have found, especially as it relates to the adoption of social media within large organizations, is if you're getting support, if you will, from the executive suite. So I'm a little curious about your organizations insofar as if you can help answer the why question, the next big hurdle could be getting that support from the executive suite that's actually going to put budget towards social. Could you share a little bit about your organizations as to how they've gone about supporting this implementation and this strategy?
Sure. Sterne Agee is a pretty entrepreneurial firm, so I'm fortunate that way. You know, when we started to consider this, Sterne Agee is a pretty entrepreneurial firm. We had considerable participation and a real openness, quite frankly, on the part of both our compliance and marketing departments to hearing the story and to working to understand how it would benefit the entrepreneurial organization. And I think, you know, from my experience, roadblocks typically come just as a result of, I'm that way, a lack of understanding or education. So I think that if you can be an ambassador and tell the story and give some real examples, certainly from a marketing point of view, I mean, social has and make the and we use Actient, so has the capabilities of using metrics to gauge efficacy, you know, especially when it's considering content. But I think that what was helpful for me too was also to utilize third-party white papers and other organizations to do demonstrations to help foster that credibility. It's, you know, it's frankly no different than when you're trying to build trust with a client, right? You've got to build that credibility. You've got to cut through the noise and differentiate. And I think if you can tell that story, that the path is a lot easier.
And I mean, I would just add, and again, I'm not part of the corporate structure in the organization. Ninja, who was a consulting firm out in Denver, who co-wrote the first financial social media, and Andre, who writes from time to time for Investment News, Michael Kitts. I mean, these, it kind of sounds a little corny, but these are the authors of our Declaration of Independence from the Cold Call. These are the people, Agee Ray, I would jump into. These are the people that are out there that are showing the real thought leaders at large firms like myself, at mine, that, you know, the change is coming. The change is here. And we're really in the early innings, and we have that opportunity to go there. But, you know, education is the key. That, to me, you know, I'm telling advisors all the time, you know, they want to just get on and go. I'm like, you know, dude, I spent a year educating myself before I shared my first content. I think it's worthwhile. I really think it makes sense to get educated.
Those are all, and I could second and vouch for all of the folks that you just mentioned. I've had the privilege of working with them. And right now, I just wanted to remind everyone that if you do have a question, we've got Mitch, and we've got Greg and myself on the call today, to use the chat feature on the GoToWebinar on the bottom right-hand side. We will moderate those questions, but we encourage you to ask them. Also, follow along. We see some conversations taking place on the Twitter feed using hashtag BDI1. So just based on what you had said, Mitch, one of the things that is of real interest is once you get past the why, you start asking the how. How do you do this? So I was curious, as far as both of your organizations, and very specific to you, Mitch, your unique experience, how have you been using social to win new business and or improve the relationships with your current customers? So we'll start with Mitch, and then we'll shift gears and ask Greg.
Well, a number of different things. I think essentially it's profiling clients and prospects, really getting better prepared for meetings. I feel like I walk into a meeting today so much better prepared than I ever could. You try to do your best, but the ability to have this online information is just incredible. Doing the research. Google Alerts is the godsend for financial advisors. I can't wait till 3 o'clock in the afternoon when my Google Alerts go off, and they go off in a number of my other accounts, as well as I have a number of accounts where I'm doing a number of mail accounts, sorry, because I'm learning so much incredible content. We had a situation last year, one of our key relationships, we got a Google alert in the middle of the afternoon saying this particular client was being considered for board of directors of a major retailer. Well, I picked up the phone, I called them, and I said, Joe, I just read this on a Google alert. What's a Google alert? That started a whole other conversation. And he said, how do you know that? And I said, well, because of this. And he says, well, and I said, it's my job to know that. That's why you hire a financial advisor. That's why you trust me. I need to know what's going on in your life. Turned out he didn't get that particular position, but it led to some lending opportunities for us through that conversation with that particular company that he wound up doing some consulting for. I never would have known about that. I'm uncovering business all the time, whether it's through searching through alumni or friends, families, organizations, running advanced searches for retirement account rollovers, things like that. I mean, you know, the commercial is an app for that. Well, LinkedIn has just about an app for all of these things, and really, you know, helps you develop that personal relationships. And you know, but just that's sort of a handful of things just to answer the question. But it really, you know, it totally is a game changer.
Yeah, and Greg, the same question is really, I'll just repeat it, is how are you using social to win new business and improve relationships with current customers?
I would echo what Mitch said about the ability to build relationships. I mean, perfect examples before this call. We spent 15 minutes talking about music backgrounds, which I otherwise would not have known about Mitch, but for the Bruce Springsteen on his LinkedIn page, right? And it gives us an ability to get past that awkward sort of moment of trying to figure out where the connection points are and having them already done by the time we get to a client meeting. It also, I think, gives you an ability to keep up with client events without bugging them with follow-up calls. So if there's a change in employment, or they post an update to their page, if you're on there, if you're connected and you're watching that, you'll be able to be in front of the curve there. I'd also say that one of my advisors here, with a nice way, and this is maybe a way to take those social connections and make them into business possibilities, is just to reach out to current connections with a simple phrase, I thought I might reach out to you in a more professional capacity. You know, to introduce a professional side of what you do, and giving people an opportunity to bridge the gap from your social relationship to potential business relationships. And many social connections may know, you know, where you work and your title, but not really have an idea of what you do day to day and what potential value you may bring to the conversation. And I think this came up earlier in the conversation today, but if you know, you can't go for the hard sell. Mitch, I think, made the point of taking these conversations offline and getting in front of people face to face. So if you don't do that, but introduce what you do and offer assistance, I think you leave the door open for additional inquiry and a continued dialogue, which is really what networking is all about.
And salesy materials, death. I mean, I don't like, some organizations are using some pre-approved content, pre-approved tweets. I mean, that sounds like a brochure. These are humans, not robots. You need to inspire and educate people. And that to me is what makes sense, not necessarily taking an interesting PDF about some strategy. Those aren't the conversations that belong there. You can have those conversations offline. I think you really have to humanize your brand first. You know, it's not look at me, look at me. You know, it's time to try something new and be a little bit more creative.
Absolutely. And speaking of something new, I was curious as to what plans you have for 2014. So what's next? What is what are you anticipating will change in 2014, or what will you be doing more of? And we'll start with Mitch.
Well, you know, I think it's time to take it in another direction, and I think that video and mobile video are really the next wave. You can certainly see that, the commitment that you see from organizations like LinkedIn in what they've done with some of their mobile content. But I'm hoping to do more video. I'm hoping, you know, I'm so inspired by not just Gary Vaynerchuk and some others that have had such great success. I see this advisor out in California. Her name's Brittany Castro. She's a young woman who's a financial planner, an RIA, and she's done a fantastic job using video on a variety of different topics to inspire and educate. So I'm really doing a lot of research to see what makes the most sense, whether having it on websites, maybe tying it into other things. I think one of the things you can do is, if you have other interests, maybe tie those things together. So I'm very passionate, besides music and Springsteen, I'm also passionate about financial literacy, and I've been doing some work with a financial literacy startup where I'm helping them create some video content, and I'm interviewing these incredible young women, millennials, actually as young as 16 years old. There's an actress named Rachel Fox I interviewed recently who tweets under the name Fox on Stocks, and she's putting out some really, really interesting content. I know you think that's crazy, a 16-year-old, but this is a 16-year-old that has really great parents. There's a young woman I sat with the other day who writes a blog about what it's like to be a millennial living in New York City. So I'm thinking about developing content along those lines that's really teaching, you know, really kind of teaching and educating, and trying to figure out where that's going to make the most sense for my partner Ann and I going forward. I'm excited about it.
Victor, I'd say for us it's also content aggregation. It's you know, how do you use content to differentiate? I might answer some of the questions that I see here too from asset managers and wholesalers, and you know, how can those organizations support our social efforts? I think if you're going to differentiate yourself, if you're going to cut through the noise and be relevant to clients, you have to have your own voice. And you can't have your own voice if all of the advisors in the firm have access to, you know, all the same firm branded material, right? You've got to be able to find articles or pieces of content that help you tell your story to your clients. And with asset managers or wholesalers, I think a lot of organizations have got some really great thought leadership that's just not packaged for social. You know, it's someone's not going to sit and read a 3-page white paper necessarily, right? So how do you take some of that content and repurpose it and make it accessible to organizations so that we can use it in our social strategies?
Right, right. And have you, in your experience, seen any particular wholesalers that are doing a good job in the education or at least assisting your efforts for social?
I think, frankly, the Templeton does a great job. We've just begun to explore some of the opportunities there. You know, they've got a number of their money managers who regularly blog, and they're repurposing that content and making it accessible.
And I'm seeing more and more every day. Kathleen Pritchard is a woman that Legg Mason uses, who does some excellent content talking to advisors. And what I like about what she's doing is she's not just talking about social media. She talks about the branding side and how critical that is. And that's something that I know is a big thing for us as advisors at UBS is creating our own brand. And that's one of the reasons I love my firm, is that they give us the ability to really create our own brand, and that is so important in the tools that they give us to do that. I've also been impressed recently with some work that Putnam has done, and they've done some really good surveys. I think we've learned a lot from that. Ridgeworth is another company. I mean, you see more and more Allianz is taking a very interesting step in that direction. So I think people are getting it. And again, the early adopters, the ones that are out there teaching and educating, are bringing great value to advisors and managers like Greg.
I would echo the same, and you know, it's interesting how they've taken different platform approaches to it as well. I would, you know, Putnam I know has done an outstanding job. First Trust, for example, portfolios out of Chicago, has been doing a lot by leveraging their individual thought leadership through video content. And then another that I'll point out is the Principal Group, which has been doing tweet chats every other week using the hashtag Advisor Talk, and they have a regular schedule, and they'll bring in advisors and encourage those who have access to Twitter to have some discussions. Shifting gears, if you will, to the questions that are coming in from the audience, I thought I'd go ahead and share a few. We already kind of addressed the first one, which was really looking at how asset managers and wholesalers are supporting social media efforts. We also received a question: to which degree are you engaging with some of the financial brands on LinkedIn, or do you engage with them at all on Twitter or any of the other platforms?
Define financial brands.
Well, let's see. I guess the financial brands would be perhaps some of the, I guess it would be the same group of either wholesalers or product providers, if you will, mutual fund companies, and ETFs. Or do you engage at all with any of the financial brands when it comes to?
I don't. That's not what LinkedIn is about for me. I mean, I think it's the information is there. That's great, and then they share content in some of the groups. But I'm really there to learn about what's important to my clients and what's important to the folks that I'd like to work with, and things that I'm passionate about. But I just haven't maybe been exposed to that much of it.
Mm-hmm. How about yourself, Greg? Any exposure?
Same for me. Yeah. No.
Okay. How about, so it sounds like it's mostly being used, obviously, to build relationships with existing clients and perhaps some prospects. Are you engaging at all with any other advisors? I know, Mitch, you mentioned a few names that I'm familiar with, Brittany Castor. So how about anyone else?
You know, she definitely stands out. I mean, you know, I've seen other people there, and I admire anybody that's an early adopter and what they're doing. I mean, I certainly have taken the, you know, I don't connect with other advisors because that sort of kind of gets in the way of my filters. But I'm impressed with what I'm seeing from a number of different firms. But really, I would say Brittany would be the one that comes to mind the most right now.
You're probably not going to see a lot of connections between advisors, Victor, just simply because of competitive nature of the business, right?
Right, right. Well, one of the questions that we inevitably always come across is some of the roadblocks, you know, insofar as that we've been talking about how organizations have gone about building the infrastructure and developing and sort of working on social media. So out of curiosity, just based on your experience, what were some of the roadblocks that you came across, and how did you go about overcoming them?
Well, it's great that obviously that's the gorilla, the elephant, anything. Compliance is certainly going to be a critical topic, and I've always taken a different approach. I've always believed that compliance is there to protect me. Compliance is there to help me, and I've always partnered with everyone that I've worked with in compliance over the years, and I've been very fortunate, and we have a really wonderful coexistence of that here. But you just don't be stupid, I think is what it comes down to. You follow the same rules you follow of doing media, sending email, marketing. You just don't talk about stocks, funds, investments. You talk about solutions, topics that audience might be passionate about. And the rules are the rules, and I think the rules are fair. I mean, obviously have lots of, I think like anything, and, and we're fortunate again
And as a former advisor, I can say that
to work with us.
Advisory business do look upon as compliance as being this anti-sales department. It's really taking the wrong approach in actually approaching them with the question, can I, as opposed to how can I, and really partnering with compliance to find out how you can reach common solutions. How about yourself, Greg, as far as roadblocks? How did Sterne and Agee get through those?
So I would have, my perspective is a little different in that I'm working to get adoption here at the firm, and I'd say one of the roadblocks that or hurdles that we had here was really just getting the fully completed profiles. I think that and this is maybe a place where wholesalers and asset managers could be helpful by way of practice management tools. Most investment professionals are there to manage relationships with people and money, and not necessarily be a marketing writer. So how do you get folks to have a profile that really has their voice, that talks about what they do, that differentiates them in a significant way? And then, once the profile is complete, what next? What are some practical next steps for adoption? And I'd say that one of the things that I came across that was a little bit of that I maybe should have known in retrospect, but was a surprise, is that don't assume that just because folks are younger and have access to the technology know necessarily what to do and how to use the tool. So I think for us it was putting our arms around some education and training and resources to be sure that people were utilizing the technology in a thoughtful way.
Right. Now, one other question that we're coming, and we're coming close to the quarter hour here, but are you engaging any of your staff or the folks within your organization to assist you with social, or is it being done solely as a single practitioner?
Well, that's actually a great question, because I think it's really critical, and in our team, all of us are on LinkedIn, and I have heard a number of examples or situations recently of some pretty large relationships that were started not by the advisor but by their client services sales assistant, who actually had a relationship that had a connection. I heard recently a story down south of an advisor whose assistant happened to be connected to someone they were trying to reach who was selling a business, who they invited to an event. It's all about events. That's a whole other topic. And invited to an event and wound up selling the business, and they got a nice piece of it, like a $10, $15 million piece of it, all because the CSA had the connection through someone else. So I think it's critical in your organization that you're not flying solo, and that you have as many people involved. I mean, that's I think that's really important.
Absolutely agree. You never know where that connectivity is going to come from. I think I've heard from some folks that they only want to make connections with those people that are going to be business relationships. So when you're trying to build credibility and with a potential client or a prospect, you never know who might know that person. And it may not be in your industry. It may not be in that closely defined network.
Well, we've been having an outstanding conversation, and I encourage folks, if you have any additional questions, post it to Twitter at #BDI1. Unfortunately, we won't get to all the questions, but we'll try to see if we can get some of those names and resources that have been mentioned in today's call to you. Also, keep in mind that there is a replay of this that will be available so you can listen in, get to experience it one more time. But before we finish off here, any final thoughts? And we'll start with Mitch, and we'll go to Greg, and then I'll turn it back to Steve.
Well, I guess two thoughts. First, a thought, and then second, kind of a humorous thing, but I think it's accurate. So I think it's important to remember that social media has much more upside when you're actually listening and responding and reacting. I think those are the key three things that you need to do. But when I think about it, I'm kind of reminded of Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men. So, he's asked, if he wanted the truth, and he says, you can't handle the truth. I think our industry is still not quite there, not fully ready to handle the truth of social media, and needs early adopters, people like us and other early adopters. Though our existence is grotesque and incomprehensible, will probably save careers. Some folks still don't want the truth because deep down in places, you don't talk about it in boardrooms. You need us online. So I would suggest anyone listening, pick your own social media weapon, so to speak, and make your first post.
I think I'm going to start using that. I like that. How about yourself, Greg? Any final
like
thoughts on that note, right?
I like it. We get inundated with so much information. It's really sensory overload, from all aspects, from media, from the email, the social media, and I think that you've got to make information accessible and digestible and relevant. And I'll go back to that sort of keeping it simple. Social media is not doing a bunch of new things. It's doing what we've always done, only better. And it's solving a basic human problem. And I think that you just, if you rely on your gut, use your instinct, go where your gut tells you to build your relationships, and then let the technology enable you to do it in just simply more effective way.
Well, outstanding. And I always learn something new in these events, and it was my privilege to moderate the panel of both Greg and Mitch. I want to thank them both for joining us. And
Thank you, Victor.
It's my privilege, and looking forward to doing more of this in the future. So with that, let's turn it back to Steve to close us out here.
Thank you very much, Victor. Great job on moderating the panel. I'd also like to thank all of the attendees for contributing your very thoughtful questions. I know there are some we didn't get a chance to address, but I will work with the panelists to make sure each question is answered, and we will follow up accordingly. Just a reminder, the webinar was recorded. We will make it available for download. You can expect an email from us with a link for that. And with that, we hope to see you again. Have a very good day.